care about current affairs. It's on the OShow.
Welcome to the OShow. I'm Laura Babcock. This is Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. And I don't think, I say this maybe every week it sounds like, but I don't think we've had a guest on that has said a stronger opinion at a more important time in Canadian history than the person who is joining me right now, Elizabeth May. She is the leader of the Green Party of Canada. And boy, did she come out against Donald Trump. She said,
well, thank you.
You said some stuff that was fire, and I think balm for the soul of nervous Canadians. Elizabeth, I got to ask you, for our viewers and listeners across Canada and all the other countries, first of all, is Canada under attack? If so, what kind from the United States? And what should we be doing about it? What do you want to say to Donald Trump and his incoming regime?
Well, I mean, I think we have to take him seriously. But being either responding in kind with bullying and threats is obviously not the Canadian way. I think reminding and shooting, looking past Donald Trump to the American voters and the American people. I think most Americans know that historically, Canada is a great neighbor and a good friend. So it's out of keeping and certainly unprecedented, which is the point I made in a press conference. We need to take a Team Canada approach. We need to negotiate from strength. We can't ignore that a U.S. president who's prepared to hurt the American economy because for some inexplicable reason his goal is to damage the Canadian economy. We can't ignore this as a threat. It's a real threat. Is it a negotiating tactic? Is it theatrics? I mean, you have to know this guy got his start really in a reality TV show, and I feel like I'm an unwilling contestant in Donald Trump's latest reality TV show. So we have to be, as Canadians, as unified as possible. Tricky when we're about to go into an election. Tricky when the Prime Minister has signaled his resignation and a leadership race for leader of the Liberal Party is now moments from actually having rules and being launched. But I think we can do it. So approaching Donald Trump, my message to Canadians is rally round. We don't take this guy as anything other than the President of the United States who is on a warpath that makes no sense. Why does he want to be Vladimir Putin's best friend and make an enemy of the country that has always been the best possible neighbor? I mentioned in the press conference, I said, look, maybe someone should get him tickets to go see Come From Away. So, but remember, that wasn't just a one-off of the wonderful people of Newfoundland and Labrador taking care of all those stranded Americans and others who were stuck at the Gander Airport, all those huge jets loaded with passengers. That was a decision that was made by Canada. And by the way, going back to September 11th, this is a little off topic from what you would expect, Laura, but the NORAD command post, it's called the Mountain. It rotates with Canadian and U.S. military personnel. On 9/11, a Canadian was in charge of the Mountain. And the decision was made within moments. Not only was all U.S. domestic air traffic to be grounded, all international flights headed to the United States were diverted to Canada. This was a seamless operation at NORAD between Canadian and U.S. military and security forces. I really wish Donald Trump got himself educated before he started throwing around accusations as if Canada's been a free rider or the U.S. is giving us billions of dollars a year. Basically nonsense. So we have to be prepared. We have to have our facts organized. And I hope we actually figure out how to be united as Canadians, as Canadian political leaders, and as different orders of government on the same page, how to tackle a White House that's gone rogue.
And not just gone rogue, has complete authority and power. I don't even consider Trump as a US president. He was elected democratically. I don't contest the results. But he has got the Supreme Court giving him carte blanche. Nothing he does is illegal. He has the complete ability to act like a Caesar. His entire expansionist rhetoric that's come out in the last couple of days and imperialism, that sounds much more like an ambitious Caesar to me, expanding the Roman Empire, than it sounds like a US president. And I think that, students of history, between all of the fascist rhetoric we were hearing during the campaign to his actual threats that he's making now, if they're not alarmed, they're not paying attention. And so when you talk about the fact, Elizabeth, that we need to have leadership and unified leadership, what I loved about your press conference is not only are you, the sage leader in Ottawa, you've got the years behind you and you've been there a long time and you love this country and you know this country, but you went out there and you didn't just say, oh, by the way, Donald Trump, we don't like what you're doing. You said, you know what, there's also the theory of taking the West Coast into Canada. Like, you kind of punched back in a funny but strong fire way, and you got picked up on US media. So I don't think just having facts is going to do it. I think we need some fire from our leaders.
I think we need to somehow be able to, I've been amazed by the fact that my press conference got picked up, strangely enough, probably more on US social media than in Canada. I've never before been on anything where there's like the hits are in the millions. You think, oh my. So, and I'm also hearing from people are saying, wait a minute, you forgot, Michigan. We want to go. Please don't forget. Don't forget Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York. I don't know. We should take Hawaii. But first we take Manhattan, and so you can get.
Berlin. No, wait.
You can have some fun with it. But also, it's serious stuff because we are a shared continent. We have a very integrated economy.
Yes.
I wasn't a fan of I mentioned this earlier, free trade agreement. Back in the day in the 88 election, I was with John Turner on, make sure we don't get subsumed into the U.S. empire. But speaking of empires, pretty clearly the U.S. is an empire in decay and decline. Mm-hmm. The lack of citizen and civic engagement, the fact that Donald Trump, as somebody who's been convicted of sexual assault, mm-hmm. as somebody who has said the horrific misogynistic things he has said, he won the popular vote. It wasn't the weirdness of the Electoral College only. Right. He actually won the popular vote, which says something to me about the risks of decline, the importance of the fact that we have an educated population in Canada. Our public school system, mm-hmm. it holds up much better compared to that of the United States. But that's the investment we make in the commons. That's the investment we make in taking care of each other. Our school system, our public healthcare system clearly needs more support and more attention, that we have a family physician or at least a primary healthcare provider for every Canadian is a right. I pointed out our healthcare system is an advantage for why would Californians probably like to live in Canada, people in Washington State, Oregon. But it has been
my cousin's in Cleveland. My cousin's in Cleveland. I won't be seeing them. I won't be seeing them anytime soon. I'm not going into the US unless I absolutely have to. But every time I've been there, they've been like, how do we get to Canada? Can we go to Canada? They are apologizing, as are many Americans that I'm seeing on social saying, we're sorry about this. We don't want this. Even if they voted for Trump, some of them are like, this is not how we treat our neighbors. So given the fact that, their facts are on our side, obviously, and globally people are aware of that, I just want to get down to brass tacks, Elizabeth, because you're not just a pundit, you are a leader. You sit in Ottawa, you've seen the secret documents. I put out a video earlier today. Why isn't Poilievre getting that top level security clearance? I with a threat of our sovereignty on the table, I think all Canadians deserve to know why Poilievre won't get that, a real reason, not some BS that he can't hold Trudeau to the fire.
And bear in mind, of course, Laura, you don't get it by right. You don't apply and automatically get it. So This is what worries me, and I've said it before publicly. But Pierre Poilievre he is completely in control of this question. Is he not asking for top secret security clearance because he's worried he's compromised in some way and won't get it? Mm-hmm. That would be an explanation for why he's not asking for it. It's not a good answer. So I do think Pierre Poilievre should step up into this issue and say, right, I am now asking for top secret security clearance. I'm going to go through the process. It clearly doesn't silence you when you have top secret security clearance. It only means you don't violate official secrets. You respect the law, and anybody with top secret security clearance. So we have a number of members of parliament who have it. All the members of the parliamentary committee on foreign interference and national security obtained their top secret security clearance to sit on that committee. And now so has Jagmeet Singh, so have I. Of course, by right of being Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau has it. Interesting, small, trivial factoid here. Trudeau never had to apply for it because you get it as of right.
Sorry, you cut off. I can't hear you. Sorry, stop. Sorry, Elizabeth, I can't hear you. You cut off. I can't hear you.
A different Wi-Fi signal.
Yeah, this is better. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to go to a different signal because sometimes this happens that I forget about this sometimes, that our Wi-Fi at home sometimes just cuts out. So I'm going to cut out for a sec, Laura, because I'm switching over
to a
different. Yeah. Yeah, I should have done that earlier. We won't disconnect again. So I was just saying, in terms of top secret security clearance, Pierre Poilievre should ask for and go through the process, because then Canadians can have confidence that there's nothing in his background that would mean he was compromised. But that's something he needs to clear up before the writ drops. We know we're going to be into an election soon, and it certainly will not inspire confidence, I think, even in a lot of conservative voters, that they don't know the answer to the question, why won't Pierre Poilievre ask for and go through the process of being vetted to know that, despite the fact that it's now public, on the public record, that there's a concern about the degree of foreign interference by the Indian government in the leadership race that Pierre Poilievre won. We don't know the extent of that. Whatever. He can remove any doubt about the potential that he's been in any way compromised by asking for and obtaining top secret security clearance. The other party leaders have all done so at this point.
So I think, I mean, the theory is that he is hoping that his followers believe the spin, right? That he didn't want to know so he could hold Trudeau's feet to the fire. Well, Trudeau's gone now, so that excuse drops. But I also think that there hasn't been a lot of care about it. Like, who cares, right? They people just want the immigration taken care of. They want money back in their pockets. Canada's as I said in the start, it's not broken, it's bruised. But the Canada broken narrative, I think, has caught a lot of people because it's a grievance narrative, and who doesn't love a good grievance narrative? That being said, now that Trump is literally threatening our sovereignty, I think suddenly now this is like not just whatever, you're just owning the lib tears, whatever that nonsense is. I'm not a liberal. It makes me laugh. Now it's, well, hold on. Who are his dance partners? Who wants Poilievre to get in really badly? Who is financing his campaign? Who helped him get the job? I mean, maybe it's all awesome, and we don't have to worry, and we can just look at his policies and what he's going to do instead of the carbon tax, or what he's going to do for housing, get to the real meat, if he has any, on his policies. But until we know that, I think it is the responsibility of not just the other political parties, but the media in this country as well, to ask him that every time he tries to do a media avail, because it's unfair to ask us to make that kind of a decision when our country is under attack. And whether, it's under actual attack or psychological attack or economic attack, we've been told there's going to be force used on Canada. And so that demands a higher level.
I agree with you entirely. And one of the things that's awkward about the timing of almost everything right now in terms of politics, but Madam Justice Hogue's report is going to come out January 31st. Doesn't give us a lot of time. If her report includes recommendations for changes to the Elections Act to better fortify Canadian democracy against the threat of foreign interference, and we now know that the RCMP is investigating plausible and credible intelligence that a murder or other attempted murders or planned murders have occurred on Canadian soil, orchestrated by a foreign government, and that foreign government is the very same government rumored to be part of the leadership race that Pierre Poilievre won, I would think he would have every possible incentive to remove that question mark, because as we get further and farther into an election, and as Justin Trudeau said in his resignation speech, I don't know how much it's actually true that he's removed himself from the equation, but he's certainly removed himself from the primary stage of the leaders' debates. And the focus of conservative rhetoric in the election campaign can no longer be, this is just about getting rid of Justin Trudeau, because he's leaving on his own accord. So yes, it's about liberal policies. It's about a different approach. All of that is real. So far, Pierre Poilievre hasn't put much in the front window of what he's offering, except I'm not Trudeau. Trudeau will be gone. These dark days of Justin Trudeau will be over. Okay, clear the decks for us, Pierre Poilievre. Remove any question marks about whether there is anything about your background. And bear in mind, he has a very scant background. There's nothing but politics. He never had a job as far as I can find out. There's a rumor, as I say, Laura, there is a rumor that he once worked at Dairy Queen, but no one can prove it. So we need to figure this out. This is a guy who has been, and I've known him for a really long time because I wasn't in Parliament when he was elected first in 2004, but I was working in Ottawa as the executive director of Sierra Club of Canada. There basically weren't any MPs I didn't get to know because at my heart level, I'm basically nonpartisan. Obviously, I'm a deeply committed Green, but I could get to know and work with MPs, whether they were Reform. I got to be friends with Deb Gray. It doesn't matter. You get to know people. I've known Pierre Poilievre since 2004. It was a young guy when he got elected. But what could be in his background that would make him worry about maybe not asking for top secret security clearance, other than this very recent history of the suggestion, which comes from intelligence sources, and intelligence, you learn this early when you start talking about top secret security clearance. Intelligence isn't evidence. Right. Intelligence is you've got assets around the world who keep their ear to the door and they're listening and they hear stuff, and it may not be true, but they pass that through channels, and we have it with our Five Eyes partners. We pay attention to chatter. So in that chatter, it's now out there as a public piece of information that there's concern about the extent of interference by the Modi government that favored Pierre Poilievre in the leadership race that he won. That alone should prompt, I hope, Poilievre's supporters and friends and conservative voters to give him a little nudge, a friendly nudge. Get this out of the way. Mm-hmm. He can do that himself by asking for and obtaining top secret security clearance. Nobody can do that for him. And as an election campaign, as we say, a week is a lifetime in politics. Who knows? As you said, Laura, nobody seems to care. I think people will care more when we get closer to voting day. We'll have who knows who carrying the Liberal standard. We know who's there for the NDP. We know who's there for the Greens and for the Bloc. But there's this unknown Liberal leader. Pierre Poilievre ought to pay some attention to making sure that he goes into an election campaign without this question mark over his head.
Well, I think he's got a couple of challenges. One being that part of what has made him appealing is he has been denigrating the state of the country and shit-talking it essentially for opportunistic gain. Nice videos about how great Canada once was, but essentially everything since Trudeau has gone to hell in a handbasket and our country sucks. And this has been the narrative. It's appealing if you agree. If you have a hard time paying groceries, you're frustrated, it's appealing. But when your country's under attack, And, and I'm listening to my teenagers telling me every day that their friends are willing to fight for the country. It changes the entire Overton window. We are no longer arguing about how unpopular Trudeau is in the carbon tax. We are now talking about, is Canada under attack? And what does that mean for our economy in real sense? Are we going to have tariffs? Are we going to have a recession? It's not good news when there's instability in an economy, even if it doesn't come to fruition. We are still in a place where there's going to be people who are going to be economically panicked, and that can have effects on the market. Consumer confidence index might be affected. So Poilievre is not going to be appealing if all he's going to do is being denigrating our country when we already have America doing it in every one of our social feeds all day long. We want someone to stand up for this country. And I also think, and I know that as we're doing this, LA is burning, the Pacific Palisades. I feel for everybody who's subjected to that fire.
Terrifying. Just
and,
terrifying.
And we've got the Midlands in England under tremendous floods. So, if this was a carbon tax election, it might not go the way that Poilievre might think it was going to go because of what we're seeing unfold. But I think it's going to be an election about the economy and national security and nothing else.
Well, we'll see what it's going to be about, because so much is in flux right now. When you have a U.S. president who is saying such outrageous things as, I'm going to buy Greenland. I mean, so it's not just Canada under attack. Trump's sort of manifest destiny U.S. rhetoric, which is just unheard of in modern times. Yeah. This is not something, sometimes we know that the U.S. operates like the cop of the world, and thank goodness we've had an independent foreign policy in this country. Thank heavens that as Prime Minister Jean Chrétien did not lead us into Baghdad when Bush was trying to get us to go there based on the lie that Saddam Hussein had back to 9/11 had something to do with that. Right. We have an independent foreign policy. We haven't been pulling our weight, for instance, on peacekeepers. We need to do more. We need to do much more around our Arctic coastal borders and making sure we have the Coast Guard vessels, the rescue vessels. We need to do a lot more on our own coastal security questions. But bear in mind, what Donald Trump is saying is not just a threat to Canada. It's a threat to global peace and stability. Because when a U.S. president is so erratic as this, and there, as you said earlier, there are no guardrails. The U.S. Supreme Court is giving him carte blanche. He's got the House and the Senate. He essentially, and the people who were keeping an eye on him in his first presidency, believe it or not, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Pentagon, were making sure that he understood where there were some boundaries, some rules. He doesn't seem to have anyone right now countering his worst impulses. You've got Elon Musk, who seems to be his top lieutenant, if not potentially the real president, who knows, interfering in elections, interfering in British politics, German politics. This is very distressing for anyone who's looking at stability of the world, a planet in crisis from the climate crisis. At the same time, global geopolitical instability. There's a reason that more and more people refer to this as a poly-crisis world. We went through pandemic and thought we were going to be able to sort of go back to normal. Nobody since the pandemic, and when I say nobody, other countries have suffered the same kind of economic challenges of post-pandemic inflationary trends. Putin invading Ukraine drove up energy prices everywhere. Ukraine is a breadbasket. It's affected world food prices. And of course, food prices are very affected by the things we were just mentioning. When you have fires, when you have floods, when you have extreme drought, we have real threats to food security because of the climate crisis. So a U.S. president who doesn't pay attention to an understanding of where allies lie, understanding that within the United Nations, you have an ability to talk to people even when relations are strained. You are able to talk to people and use diplomacy to avert conflict. Right. I don't think Trump has any of those instincts or impulses, and I don't see anyone around him who's capable of urging him to figure those things out to keep or to restore some degree of peace and security for all nations on earth.
So, Elizabeth, here's where I'm going to go full cynical because just I read the zeitgeist. It's what I do for a living, right? So, I think this is actually a long planned shift of the world order that was established after the Second World War, where the lines were drawn on all kinds of countries, and the Western alliances took form and have mostly led to a period of peace and stability. That has irked Putin greatly since the wall fell in Berlin, as we know, and he has been working very hard on this. And when we have not only a hot war with tanks rolling into a sovereign nation of Ukraine a couple of years ago, but now we have North Korea sending in its troops to be used. I think they call it some horrible thing like cannon meat or something. They're just throwing them in front of these guns. And then you start to see these alliances build up around the world. We've got 5 or 6 countries forming on one side. We've got the EU and North America. And then we've got a US president who not only doesn't look like he wants to protect the world, he looks like he doesn't want to protect the world order. In fact, it looks like he'd like to dismantle it and let his autocratic whims fly and, benefit the US and his plutocracy or his oligarchy or his broligarchy. I mean, that's what it looks like. If you drop the idea that norms hold, if you drop the idea that the world order as we've all grown up is how it's always been, and you realize, no, actually, it hasn't always been this way, and it doesn't need to stay this way if we can't stop Trump. If he decides that he wants it to go that direction, I don't think that our norms will hold. And I think we're in a rather dystopic place. And so I've heard, and I support the theory, that we really entered a different looking World War III when the war started in Ukraine. And now that we're seeing alliances globally take sides and get involved, I feel as though we're in World War III. We just don't recognize it as exactly the same kind of world war as the first two. So we don't call it that. But I don't know what else you need to look for. And if he's now threatening sovereign nations, Panama and Greenland and Canada, and you've got the EU saying they'll fight to support Greenland because of its Danish connections, I mean, are we not, Elizabeth May, in the opening drumbeats of a world war?
We might be, but I think it's important to say as Canadians, we've always punched above our weight.
Mm.
The Canadian government, the Canadian people can step up into this and find our like-minded democracies. This isn't just a conflict where certain people take sides. Right-wing populist fascists are on the rise.
Yes.
Where we have an alliance of like-minded democracies, Canada is one of the strongest. We have one of the strongest economies in the world right now.
Right.
Canadians don't feel it. It's like you feel it doesn't, real wages are not keeping up with cost of living. But we're looking at what countries are capable of stepping up into a time of great flux. Certainly, as you describe it, Laura, you're right. Trump and Putin like creating chaos and disorder. They're perfectly happy to want to see what we came to think was inevitable. I mean, we think back on a book like the end of history. What nonsense to think that we were that secure and this is the new world order. It will always continue to be thus. Liberal democracies are going to be stable. You have to fight for democracies. You have to fight to hold a democracy. It's work to engage your fellow citizens in the work of what is in our common, what's the common good? What do we do to take care of each other? And that common good and that sense of neighborhood, I would say our neighborhood as Canada, well, the circumpolar north, the Inuit presence of the circumpolar north. There is an Arctic Council. It includes the US and Russia, but there's seats at the table in the Arctic Council for the voices of Indigenous peoples, for the Inuit. The Inuit of Greenland are a substantial part of that circumpolar world. We are connected around the world in different ways as a country. That's the point I was trying to make in our press conference. We're not a wannabe 51st state. Forget it. We are a sovereign nation, and we have formed multilateral alliances that extend in many directions. We are very welcome as a potential, certainly Scandinavia sees Canada as a sensible, reliable trading partner, ally,
Yeah.
a liberal democracy that's functional. So do the European Union nations see Canada as a liberal democracy that's functional. So do a lot of our friends within APEC. We've had the extent, and it is trading relationships often, but it's also in multilateral institutions, whether the United Nations or the WTO or various, the Commonwealth, La Francophonie, that takes us into really close relationships with many countries in the African continent. So we've got a role to play in the world to say we're protecting democracies here. We're going to put our commitment to salvaging, protecting, and buttressing democracies to deliver on a livable, survivable biosphere and an end to the deep injustice of inequity, which is all around the world. The billionaire class has to go. I don't want to hurt them. I just want to tax their wealth to reduce them to be mere millionaires where they'll have to count their pennies at the end of the month. We don't need to see, and the glorification of wealth for its own sake and conspicuous consumption must be seen globally as a threat to collective well-being. That's something that is already beginning to happen. We were already seeing conversations in Canada, and former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland was part of this, saying we're going to negotiate, and we have done a minimum corporate tax rate globally. Now that's the beginning of some very important stuff about what do we do together to ensure collective survival. So we can say there's some people, I don't know where Musk has said he wants to, get to Mars. Maybe we could do a GoFundMe for a one-way ticket and send him sooner than later. But meanwhile, those of us who recognize we only got one home, it's called planet Earth, this is where we live, collectively, we need to pull together and protect all of the world's nations and economies from Trump's and Putin's worst impulses. They're not alone. There are also more, and we can name them, but I'll stop there, Laura. We are not going to stand back as passive observers to the idea that we're going into World War III. No way. We are peacemakers. We are peacekeepers. And we actually believe in taking care of our fellow Canadians. But how about also the family, the human family, which is one family, one rather dominant species that has no existence without a survivable biosphere.
Well, Elizabeth, I'm going to leave it there with you because I can't think of a better way to end it. This is not just a fight that Canada is facing, it's a fight that the world is facing. And it's not just a fight against Trump and Putin and a possible new world order. It's a fight for our actual survival on this planet as a species. And I think if we think of the world as our neighbors, and we've always been great neighbors in Canada, we can come together. And I hope that our political leaders can find your courage and your humor and your sense of Canadian values and identity and push back on Trump. Some are doing it, some are not. We all need to. I include our business leaders in our audience and everybody else. Talk to your neighbors. I've been very, very active on social media, more so than usual, if you can imagine, the last few days, because what I'm saying to everybody is this is now essentially a litmus test. The Overton window is moved in Canada. Every post that you do, if it's a wink, wink at Trump, it's not going to be seen as just, trying to stoke a little bit of anger and rage. It's going to be seen as taking a side when our country is under attack. And so I think that things have really changed and we're going to have to work together.
Can I just pick up on something you said as almost an aside, Laura, and just hold it out there because I want to hear more about it. You said your kids and their friends, young Canadians, are saying, I'll fight for my country.
Yes.
We haven't had a reason to pull together as a country. We've taken a lot for granted from the sacrifices made by my father in the Second World War and his generation, because we've been allowed the great good fortune of cruising on the investments and sacrifices they made. We need all of us. And to hear that your connection to young people is saying, I'm going to step up for Canada is
Absolutely.
enormously encouraging.
My sons and his friends are wondering if they have to join the military, if they have to get weapons, which is terrifying, but they're talking about it. And my daughter and her friends, I had a big conversation with them yesterday. They're fully aware that, you know, they had the news about Trump's comments from TikTok before I even picked them up from school. So
Well, tell your kids the most important thing they can pick up and put in their hands is that stubby little pencil and go vote. Make sure that in this coming election, every single Canadian who has the right to vote votes. I think I'm not going to say how to vote, but get into this because we're fighting for democracy. And what aids and abets the oligarchs and the billionaire class and all of it is people who think, oh, well, it's kind of a rigged game anyway. Doesn't really matter how you vote. It matters. So when young people vote, it'll change everything.
well, they're too young. They wish they could, believe me, because they didn't ask for Trump to be president. They didn't want him, and now they've got to deal with him, and it's unfair. But it is what it is. It's an unfair world. With
Of course, you're too young to have kids who could vote. I should know that right off the bat.
no, I
Look,
started late. I'm 52. They could be a lot older. But you know
well,
what?
look, it's important that we have these conversations. So I just want to thank you for asking me on OShow. And Laura, keep up the good work. Keep waking people up.
Well, we have to all be awake. I hope none of this comes to pass. I said to my kids, nothing has happened yet. So let's hope that it doesn't. But we have been given a warning shot across the bow of our country, and we have to prepare. And I think that the best way we do that is by working together. Thank you so much, Elizabeth May. And thank you to all of you who have been watching the OShow in record numbers on YouTube and downloading it on Apple Music and Spotify. These conversations are essential. At very least, we need to be talking about it and wide awake. Thank you so much, Elizabeth May. She's leader of the Green Party of Canada, of course, and a very sage politician who is well liked and well trusted by everybody.
Another way of saying I'm really old.
No, really, really wise, Elizabeth, really wise and respected, which is hard in 2025. It really
Thanks,
is.
Laura.
Thank you.
Take care.
We'll talk soon.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the OShow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the OShow. It's the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the OShow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the OShow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the OShow. It's a podcast, the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. Stay informed with the OShow, OShow.
Your merch bin.